For some folks, seeing those two lines on a pregnancy test is like hitting the jackpot. For others, it's more like a kick in the gut. And for our main gal, well, it's the latter. Just a month ago, she was kicking it with her buddies, Miran and Minwook, munching on pizza and shooting the breeze. Then, out of the blue, they drop the big news: they're dating. And just like that, their first day as a couple was official. Even though she felt like she'd taken a punch to the gut, she slapped on a smile and tossed out her congrats. After all, they were friends, right? The three of them, Miran, Minwook, and her, had been tight since their middle school days. In fact, she and Minwook go way back to their sandbox days, with Miran joining the gang later on. But honestly, they'd been a trio for so long that it was hard to remember who became buddies with whom first. She'd always figured they'd stick together, just the three musketeers. But hearing about their relationship, she felt like she'd been sucker-punched. She'd kept her feelings for Minwook under wraps, not wanting to mess up their perfect trio. But now, she wished she'd spilled her guts to him when she had the chance. Seeing the two of them together, completely oblivious to her heartache, felt like a betrayal. She knew there was no fairy tale ending for her one-sided love. She wasn't about to throw caution to the wind and have a random one-night stand. But then Miran, with her trademark oversharing is caring attitude, started bragging about Minwook's bedroom skills. That got her thinking. Why couldn't she have a bit of that fun? So, she decided to hit the town, ready to wave goodbye to 27 years of untouched innocence. Fast forward to now, and she's staring at a positive pregnancy test when Miran barges in. Quick as a cat, she tries to cover it up, claiming she's exercising for stamina. But Miran's no fool. She spots the test and demands answers. In a whirlwind of confusion, our gal spills the beans about her one-night stand, leaving Miran feeling guilty for suggesting the bar where it all went down. But there's no time for self-blame. Miran insists they head to the clinic after work. Later that day, Heewon walks into the clinic sporting a new look, almost incognito. Miran, puzzled, asks her about the getup. Heewon explains she needs to keep a low profile, given her status as a role model. However, Miran points out that her disguise is more conspicuous than her regular attire. She reminds Heewon that there's no shame in visiting a gynecologist and urges her to ditch the glasses. It turns out Miran anticipated Heewon's anxiety and chose this upscale clinic to avoid any awkward encounters. Heewon appreciates Miran's thoughtfulness, but her gratitude is cut short when she spots Minwook at the clinic. Shocked, she questions Miran, who nonchalantly reveals she invited him, believing in the power of collective thinking. Heewon protests, but Miran dismisses her concerns, reminding her of their long-standing friendship. Soon after, Miran brings up the topic of the man responsible for Heewon's pregnancy, encouraging her to find him. As they discuss, Miran spots a girl in a school uniform resembling Heewon's students, accompanied by a man. Heewon is taken aback, having been assured of privacy at this clinic. On closer inspection, she recognizes the girl, Se-hyun Kong. Despite Miran's attempt to defuse the situation, Heewon is concerned that the man might be exploiting Se-hyun. She approaches them, offering her support to the visibly confused Se-hyun. Things escalate quickly when Heewon confronts the man, only to freeze on realizing he is the one responsible for her pregnancy. In the heat of the moment, Miran and Minwook sprint towards Heewon to put a lid on the brewing drama. But as they close in, they notice Heewon's intense stare at a man and wonder what's cooking. Heewon, jittery and wide-eyed, quickly rushes over to them and spills the beans. That man is her baby daddy. Miran, all fired up, makes a beeline for him but is intercepted by her cooler-headed boyfriend, Minwook. Caught off guard, the man turns to the young girl, Se-hyun, asking who the fiery lady is. Se-hyun reveals that Heewon is her homeroom teacher and introduces the man as her uncle, Do-jun Kong. Sensing Miran's skepticism, Se-hyun assures her that she's got nothing shady going on with her uncle, even offering to show legal documents if needed. Do-jun, trying to smooth things over, invites Heewon to come closer for a proper introduction. Reluctantly, she steps forward, apologizing and quickly shifting her attention back to Se-hyun, curious about her presence at the clinic. Se-hyun explains that her family is a bit unusual, which prompts Do-jun to chime in, teasing about the normalcy of her getting a sibling. A flustered Se-hyun pleads with Hee-won to keep this hush-hush at school, internally kicking herself for jumping to conclusions and reminding herself that not everyone's life revolves around pregnancy like hers. Hee-won answers Se-hyun's query about her clinic visit by pointing at her friends, jokingly referring to them as an engaged couple. Just as Hee-won is in the middle of her tall tale, the nurse calls her name for her appointment. Alarm bells ring, but her quick-thinking friends step in, pretending they are the ones here for a checkup, saving Hee-won from an awkward reveal. As the clock ticks away, they all find themselves camped in the waiting room. Hee-won is off playing doctor-patient, leaving Miran to shoot the breeze with Se-hyun. She nudges Se-hyun, asking if she's got someplace to be. Se-hyun, however, insists on sticking around for her teacher. Meanwhile, Miran is sneakily sizing up Do-jun Kong. Initially, she feared he'd be some lowlife, but he's surprisingly well-to-do. Plus, he's easy on the eyes and dressed to the nines. Is this guy loaded, she wonders. She's intrigued by his nonchalant attitude towards bumping into his one-night stand at a gyno clinic. She catches him deep in thought and itches to pick his brain. But she reins in her curiosity, for now. Lost in his thoughts, Do-jun Kong is trying to piece together the puzzle. Could she really be my one-night stand, he ponders. That was the first and only time he had ever done that, but boy, was it memorable. He remembers waking up feeling fantastic until he spotted the 2 bills she had left behind. It made him laugh at first, then stung his pride. Was that all he was worth to her? He spent ages trying to track her down, to no avail. And now, here she was, teaching his niece. He sneaks a peek at Minwook, dismissing him as her husband. But one question keeps nagging him. Why is she visiting a gynecologist? Meanwhile, inside the doc's office, Hee-won is swallowing the news of her 6-week pregnancy. The doctor, oblivious to her solo visit, casually asks if her hubby tagged along. Hee-won's brain is a whirlwind of worry as she tries to figure out what to tell the doctor. But before she can get a word in, the doc interrupts her train of thought. We don't do abortions here, she says. If that's what you're after, you should look elsewhere. Hee-won's jaw drops. She fires back, calling out the doc for her rudeness. Sure. She's an unmarried mom-to-be, but that doesn't give the doc the right to throw the A-word around so casually. Annoyed and feeling judged, she exits the office. Upon leaving, she hears her student Se-hyun calling out her name. She turns around and is surprised to see Do-jun Kong still hanging around. Miran and Se-hyun hurry over, full of concern. Hee-won puts on a brave face and tells them she was there for a routine checkup, thanking them for their worry. Just when she thinks she's successfully dodged the bullet, a nurse pops out, reminding her not to forget her baby's ultrasound picture. The unexpected announcement leaves Se-hyun and Do-jun in shock. Later, at a cafe, Hee-won and Do-jun sit in awkward silence. She gulps down a glass of water, trying to shake off her nerves. When Do-jun points out her anxiety, she quickly denies it. As she tries to explain her situation, referring to him as Se-hyun's uncle, he cuts her off and corrects her, it's Do-jun Kong. She wonders if he's making fun of her. She pleads with him to separate her personal life from her professional one, assuring him she's a dedicated teacher. As she rambles on, Do-jun remains silent, leaving her feeling like she's the only one at fault. Exhausted, she gets ready to leave, but as she does, Do-jun drops the dreaded question, is it my child? Hee-won quickly shuts down Do-jun's suspicions, assuring him that he is not the father of her unborn child. His surprise is evident, but he suggests they continue their conversation and get to the bottom of things. Despite her initial hesitation, Hee-won agrees to sit back down and discuss the matter further. Do-jun can't help but question her story. She plans to marry another man, yet she was intimate with him. And now she's checking for pregnancy with her friends in tow. Something doesn't add up. But Hee-won dismisses his doubts, asserting that regardless of how her story appears, it's none of his concern. Confused and somewhat frustrated, Do-jun proposes they take some time to process everything and meet again the next day. Before Hee-won can respond, he informs her that her friends are waiting outside and abruptly leaves. Outside, Miran and Minwook await Hee-won in their car. They receive a call from Hee-won, informing them she's visiting her mom and will head home afterward. Knowing about Hee-won's strained relationship with her mother, Minwook offers to pick her up. But Miran quickly interjects, reminding Minwook that his focus should be on her, his girlfriend, not Hee-won. Minwook tries to explain that his concern for Hee-won stems from their long-standing friendship, even before he started dating Miran. But Miran remains unconvinced. On reaching her mother's place, Hee-won is met with a frosty reception. Rather than asking about her well-being, her mother questions her sudden visit. Hee-won deflects the question but internally wishes her mother had shown more concern. She attempts to break the icy silence by asking about her father, but her mother offers no response. Hee-won throws a curveball, asking if her mom still harbors resentment for her dad. She then starts to chat about her half-sibling, but her mom quickly shuts it down. "Why are you talking about her like she's family?" she snaps, warning Hee-won not to equate herself with another woman's daughter. It's clear that Hee-won's step-siblings aren't her mother's favorites. An outsider might mistake their conversation as a sign of a loving relationship. But the reality is far from it. Hee-won's mom has always been distant and unaffectionate. Hee-won ponders her reason for visiting. Perhaps she was seeking advice about her unplanned pregnancy. But she already knows her mom's stance on unwanted pregnancies. She'll likely tell her to terminate it. With this in mind, Hee-won switches gears, asking her mom about her feelings towards her dad and whether they ever loved each other. Her mom senses Hee-won is holding back something and prods her to spill it. Hee-won finally confesses her fears. Does her mom hate her because she hates her dad? Is she blamed for ruining her mom's life? Surprisingly, her mom admits that accepting an unwanted pregnancy isn't easy, but insists she provided everything Hee-won needed. This brings Hee-won to tears. She accuses her mom of never showing love and apologizes for the unexpected visit. As she heads for the door, her mom calls after her, asking if she's okay. But Hee-won leaves without a word. The next day, we see Do-jun Kong at work, lunch in hand. His colleague notices his distracted demeanor and asks what's up. Do-jun drops a bombshell: he's getting married. He wants a May wedding and asks his friend to clear his schedule. His friend thinks he's joking until Do-jun asks for help finding a new home suitable for raising a child and booking a wedding venue. Realizing Do-jun is serious, his friend asks questions. Did he go on a blind date? Is the bride-to-be from a wealthy family? But all his inquiries are met with negative responses, leaving him stumped. Next, his friend asks if the bride-to-be is the hot new model they just signed. After all, she did ask to meet Do-jun Kong personally. But Do-jun shakes his head. Nope, not her. This answer leaves his buddy scratching his head in confusion. To add to the surprise, Do-jun casually mentions he needs to visit Daehan High School tomorrow to meet the mother of his child. His friend's jaw drops. Wait, you're gonna be a dad? Do-jun apologizes for springing the news so suddenly and explains that the mother is a teacher at the school. Switching scenes, we find Hee-won at work. Mentally worn out from all the thinking she's been doing. So deep in thought she doesn't even hear her boss calling her until her colleague nudges her. Her boss isn't pleased, criticizing her lack of attention during a brief 20-minute staff meeting. He even questions how she plans to teach if she can't stay focused for such a short span. The meeting ends with the introduction of a new student teacher who'll be assisting Hee-won. As she's processing this news, her colleague spots her doodling Do-jul 2 lines on her notepad. The colleague teases her, saying it sounds like a name she knows. Hee-won dismisses it, saying she just remembered to include 2 lines in her teaching notes. But her boss isn't amused by the chatter and chides her again for talking during the meeting. He wraps up by announcing a staff dinner that evening and expects everyone to attend. After the meeting, the new student teacher, Ji-hoon Lee, approaches Hee-won. He's a looker, and Hee-won's female colleague can't help but swoon. As they walk back together, Ji-hoon mentions how much he missed Hee-won and teases her for not appearing thrilled to see him. She quickly sets boundaries, asking him to address her formally at work and be careful around the students, especially the girls. Ji-hoon just laughs it off, saying she's still the same jealous Hee-won from their college days. We learn that Hee-won and Ji-hoon go way back. They met during their third year of college when Ji-hoon, a first year, was already a campus heartthrob. With both parents in education, a second-place class ranking, and his good looks, he was always the center of attention. Everyone noticed him, except Hee-won. They were both in liberal arts class. Hee-won once lent Ji-hoon a pen. To show his gratitude, Ji-hoon returned the favor by treating Hee-won to lunch. It was a simple gesture, nothing more, and after that lunch, Ji-hoon vanished from lectures, fading like a forgotten dream. However, Ji-hoon had an uncanny habit of using Hee-won's name as a get-out-of-jail-free card to escape clingy girlfriends. Bewildered and annoyed, Hee-won confronted him, demanding an explanation. With a smirk, Ji-hoon confessed that he found Hee-won unshakable and hence, the perfect scapegoat. He justified his actions, claiming it was exhausting fending off love-struck women who mistook his kindness for interest. When he insinuated she was jealous, Hee-won's fuse blew. Miran, joining the fray, landed a punch on Ji-hoon's face. That day, on the campus green, Ji-hoon was schooled by two fierce ladies. The incident fizzled out, without further ado. Ji-hoon was soon drafted into the army, and Hee-won graduated, thinking she'd seen the last of him. Fast forward to present day, they're standing in front of her class as she introduces Ji-hoon as their new student teacher. After instructing her student, Se-hyun, to meet her post-lunch, she advises Ji-hoon to explore the school or prep for his class during her free period. Lost in thought, Hee-won's mind drifts to her recent conversation with Do-jun Kang. She's amusingly reminded of his insistence on his full name, which oddly rhymes with Do-jul. Suddenly, she spots a man resembling Do-jun. On closer inspection, she realizes it's him. Shocked, she swiftly grabs his hand, dragging him to a secluded corner. She demands to know why he's at her school. To which he calmly replies that they had plans to meet. He asks her to release his hand and advises her to refrain from her impromptu sprints. She proposes they reconvene after her work, but he insists on a quick chat due to time constraints. Then, out of the blue, he pops the suggestion, "Let's get married." This revelation leaves Hee-won reeling. They barely know each other aside from that single, shared night. As she proposes a more in-depth conversation later, she hears the principal nearby, looking for her and Do-jun Kang. Thinking fast, she clings to Do-jun, pretending she nearly had a tumble and he saved her from falling. She plays it off like she's directing him elsewhere. When the principal asks Do-jun for confirmation, he backs her up, saying he has no intention of going anywhere else. This makes Hee-won question if they'd crossed paths before. In a surprising turn of events, he sends the principal ahead, asking for a private word with Hee-won. Suddenly, she feels woozy, realizing he's the school's chairman. Is she about to be fired? And why is he talking about taking responsibility and proposing marriage? Is he assuming she's after his money because of the baby? Despite the confusion, she knows something isn't adding up. All she can think of is getting back to prep for her next class. But Do-jun isn't done talking. Misunderstanding his intentions, she tells him she plans to resign before the first period ends, ensuring she'll never cross paths with him again. She asserts her intentions of raising Do-jul, a nickname for the baby meaning 2 lines, by herself. Leaving a puzzled Do-jun behind, she strides off, leaving him trying to make sense of what just transpired. As Do-jun saunters back to his workspace, his secretary gives him a quizzical look. After all, tonight's meeting has been in the diary for over a week, and it's his job to keep schedules running like clockwork. However, Do-jun explains, with a hint of mischief in his eyes, that the principal's heartfelt plea was too persuasive to resist. Now, the secretary is left with the tricky task of canceling a week-old dinner appointment at the drop of a hat. With a chuckle, Do-jun teases his secretary, claiming he's the second-best smooth talker in the country. He's confident in his secretary's ability to work this out. The secretary retorts, suggesting Do-jun, the supposed number one persuader, handle the dinner cancellation himself. After all, Do-jun's usually so rigid that he wouldn't even take a bathroom break if it wasn't in his schedule. So, what's brought about this sudden change? Their banter is interrupted when Do-jun spots Hee-won. He curiously asks his secretary if Do-jun sounds like Do-jul. The secretary, puzzled by the question, gets a vague response and a reminder about the dinner rescheduling. Still, he can't help but mention the awkwardness between the chairman and Hee-won, hinting at a one-sided marriage proposal. Do-jun brushes it off, attributing it to Hee-won's shyness. Later, in the office, Hee-won and Se-hyun share a heart-to-heart. Hee-won probes about any unusual behaviors from her uncle the previous day. Se-hyun assures her that her uncle is a meticulous planner and not prone to spontaneous actions. This leaves Hee-won pondering if their night together was part of his plan. In a surprising turn, Se-hyun reveals that her sibling's birth mother isn't her own. She also spills the beans about Do-jun's age, he's 34. Hee-won is relieved to finally have a piece of the puzzle. After sharing her family's secrets, Se-hyun proposes they swap secrets. The young girl seems glad to have someone to confide in and assures Hee-won she won't judge. Touched by her maturity, Hee-won thanks her and wonders if this level-headedness runs in the family. Despite her pregnancy-induced exhaustion, she's left marveling at Se-hyun's poise. As Se-hyun exits the office, she's startled by a friend who practically yanks her outside. Hollering about big news. It turns out, high school heartthrobs Tae-woo and Ki-young are set to face off in a one-on-one basketball game. Se-hyun shrugs, unimpressed until her friend mentions that this isn't just any game. The two boys had a spat over a girl. Now, that's some classic teenage drama. Curious, Se-hyun probes for more details. Apparently, Ki-young was talking about some girl like she was his personal possession when Tae-woo stepped in. Given Tae-woo's laid-back nature and distaste for violence, he proposed settling the matter on the basketball court instead of a brawl. As for the girl in question, Se-hyun's friend brushes it off, more interested in the showdown than the damsel in this drama. Her friend, smitten with Tae-woo, considers Se-hyun lucky to have him as a neighbor. But Se-hyun sees it differently. To her, Tae-woo is far from the charming boy everyone else sees. She knows his lazy, manipulative side and his cunning ability to exploit others' weaknesses. Even her own father didn't believe her when she complained about him. Yet, she sees a silver lining in this situation. If Tae-woo gets a girlfriend, maybe she'll finally be free of him, a thought that makes her shout freedom, startling her friend. The game begins, and Tae-woo casually tosses his jacket on Se-hyun's head, earning approving whispers from the crowd. However, she overhears some students speculating she's the cause of the guy's feud. Annoyed, she hands the jacket to her friend and leaves without explanation. Walking away, she believes Tae-woo only interfered because she was the subject of the dispute. She anticipates rumors and misunderstandings, considering her plan to speed things up by finding him a girlfriend herself. Meanwhile, the new student teacher approaches the crowd, sitting next to Se-hyun's friend. He introduces himself, and she recognizes him. He thanks her and asks for her name. Upon hearing Arianiku, he compliments her, leaving her starstruck. However, his real motive is to learn more about Se-hyun and Hee-won's conversation. Even if he doesn't get any info, he figures it can't hurt to make a new friend. This leaves us wondering, just what kind of teacher is he, really? Later that day, the teachers roll into an expensive restaurant for a dinner hosted by the principal. Their eyes widen at the sight of the fancy place, and they can't help but assume the chairman must have footed the bill. As they settle in, Ji-hoon asks Hee-won if he can snag the seat next to her. But she playfully shoos him away, suggesting he finds another spot. Luckily, another colleague steps in and saves the day, allowing him to sit. Just as they're getting comfortable, the chairman strolls in, causing a ripple of excitement through the room. Hee-won nearly chokes on her drink, her surprise plain on her face. Even Ji-hoon, who's been observing her, checks if she's okay. The principal kicks off the dinner with a surprise announcement. Instead of his usual lengthy speech, they've invited the chairman to say a few words. His speech is short and sweet, leaving everyone relieved that they didn't have to endure the principal's usual rambling. Throughout dinner, Hee-won and Do-jun barely touch their food. Do-jun keeps glancing towards the entrance and asks questions about Ji-hoon, the new teacher. On learning that he's a student teacher from Myeongwoon University, the chairman wonders if Hee-won has a thing for younger guys. Ji-hoon is summoned to the chairman's table. After some small talk about college life, the chairman starts grilling him with intense questions. He then pours Ji-hoon a drink, giving him an icy stare that leaves Ji-hoon wondering if he stepped on a landmine. Meanwhile, Hee-won finishes her meal and prepares to leave. But not before sharing some juicy gossip about Ji-hoon with a colleague who seems smitten by him. She reveals that Ji-hoon prefers motels to trips and has a wild side. Her colleague bursts into laughter, claiming she wouldn't mind if Ji-hoon were a wolf. Hee-won tries to convince her about Ji-hoon's lack of principles, but her warnings fall on deaf ears. Chuckling, Hee-won waves goodbye and heads out. Outside, the spring chill catches Hee-won off guard. As she's shivering, the Do-jun sneaks up on her, asking if she's heading home. She jumps, startled, but quickly composes herself and confirms. He offers her a ride, which she politely declines. He then drapes his jacket over her shoulders, causing her to jump again. He teases her about her skittishness, and she counters that he keeps surprising her. With a laugh, he insists she keeps the jacket since she looks cold. So he asks her what she was doing there, and she explains that she didn't know where to go because she got lost. However, he mentions that he has an excellent sense of direction and he's great at finding paths. He adds that he's so skilled that he can make paths where there weren't any previously. As they stand there, he nudges her towards his car, hinting that it's warmer there. Just when she's about to refuse, he leans in and confesses that he wouldn't have braved the cold if it wasn't for her. Smooth operator, isn't he? Their chit-chat continues as Do-jun Kong suggests again that they move the conversation to his car. Once inside the car, he teases her, asking if she at least knows her address, despite her lousy navigation skills. Then he drops the big question, has she considered his morning marriage proposal? Her answer is as swift as it is firm, nope, not marrying you, Mr. Chairman. And there he goes again, insisting on his name. Hee-won, puzzled, asks if his name holds that much importance for him. He responds, clarifying that he's just reminding her since she called him Do-jul earlier. She quickly corrects him, stating Do-jul is the baby's nickname. This sparks a debate. He argues he should have been part of the nickname decision since half the baby is his. But Hee-won denies the baby is his. The argument heats up, leading him to pull over and challenge her to prove he's not the father. Plus, he's not happy with Do-jul out of all the cute nicknames available, why that one? They bicker until he finally accepts the nickname, mainly because Hee-won slips and refers to the baby as their baby. She quickly backtracks, not wanting to burden him with fatherhood. He's hurt and insists on the marriage proposal again, but she keeps declining. He asks her for a solid reason for her refusal. And she says they don't know each other well enough. He disagrees, listing all the things he knows about her, including some intimate details that make her cringe. She pleads with him to skip the steamy parts, arguing they don't know each other well enough for marriage. But he thinks they can learn, especially since they seem to gel quite well on certain topics. She counters, saying a family should be built on love, not lust. To her surprise, he suggests they start loving each other now. Do-jun then floats the idea of a first date since they already had a sleepover together, and he's popped the question. But Hee-won is not so easily swayed. Do-jun then dives into his spiel about wanting a complete family for their baby, Do-jul. He wants the kid to experience love from both parents and thinks marriage is the way to go. Hee-won, though, insists on marrying for love, not convenience. So Do-jun suggests they start dating to see if love blossoms. This time, Hee-won agrees, with a stern caveat: agreeing to a date does not equate to accepting his proposal. As she leaves, she notes to herself that Do-jun seems like a guy who always gets what he wants. When Hee-won arrives home, she finds her friend Miran in a tiff with Minwook. After scolding Miran for leaving poor Minwook out in the cold, Miran pulls her aside to drop a bombshell: she's figured out who the father of Hee-won's baby is. The chairman of Hee-won's school and VP of the Daehan group, no less. But Hee-won seems unfazed. She knew already. In the process of spilling the beans, Miran also accidentally reveals a secret outing she'd kept from Minwook. This sparks a rift between the couple, and Minwook asks Miran for a private chat. Once alone, he opens up about his relationship with Hee-won, explaining how they grew up together and how she's like a sister to him. He assures Miran that he'll change his protective habits towards Hee-won if they're hurting her. But Miran is left scratching her head, wondering why Minwook is suddenly sharing all this. He reveals that her silent treatment has been affecting his work and that he's been waiting outside all day to talk to her. After unloading, he asks if she's done being mad and proposes to show her something. He stands up, announcing he's going to kiss her. Miran is taken aback, reminding him that Hee-won is in the next room. But Minwook isn't deterred. It's just a kiss, after all. But one thing leads to another, and they emerge from the room looking rather disheveled. The next day, Hee-won and Do-jun are off on their date, with Miran and Minwook tailing them in full spy mode. Do-jun, ever the gentleman, had invited her friends, but Hee-won told him they're a bit odd. And boy, she wasn't kidding. After a thorough grilling about Do-jun from Miran and Minwook, they've taken it upon themselves to investigate the potential couple. Meanwhile, Hee-won can't help but notice Do-jun's transformation. Gone is the corporate tycoon look, and in its place is a more relaxed, casual vibe. She's surprised, but finds it refreshing and, dare she say, attractive. In the midst of their chat, Do-jun casually asks about her age. She's 27, she replies. As he's about to share his, she playfully interrupts, revealing she already knows, thanks to Se-hyun's little chit-chat. This prompts Do-jun to tease her about doing her own investigation. But she assures him it was all part of a conversation about Se-hyun's family. And oh, by the way, he's 4 years younger than Se-hyun's dad. As they continue their stroll, Do-jun decides to drop the formalities. He wants to call her Hee-won instead of the usual stiff Ms. Jang. She's taken aback but gives him a go-ahead with a hint of hesitation. He then nudges her to follow suit, suggesting she calls him Appa instead of Mr. Kong. She playfully counters, opting for Do-jun. Suddenly, Do-jun veers towards Miran and Minwook's not-so-secret hiding spot. He greets them cheerfully, inviting them to join the movie date. They quickly agree, making it a double date of sorts. Once inside the theater, Hee-won notices it's just them. She asks if Do-jun bought all the tickets, but he shrugs it off, explaining he just requested an empty theater. It dawns on her that he's the VP of the Daehan group, which owns the theater chain. Oh, the perks of being rich. He checks if she's comfy and if there's a movie she'd like to see. Before she can answer, Minwook jumps in, listing her preferences. He suggests to Do-jun that such details matter in a relationship. But Miran pulls him back, reminding him that Hee-won can handle herself. Soon, a waiter pops in to check if they need anything else. Do-jun orders mango juice, cheese popcorn, and the most popular movie. What a guy. As the flick rolls on, Hee-won's eyes light up. This is the movie she's been dying to watch. But things take a turn when a brutal scene unfolds. Do-jun Kong, in a flash, covers her eyes, babbling about how this film is too harsh for their unborn kiddo. He's protective, sure. But it's getting on her nerves. Just as she's about to protest, he leans in close, so close they could kiss. But they don't. They pull back, leaving an awkward silence hanging in the air. This moment triggers a memory in Hee-won, a memory of a night when Do-jun Kang was more than just a friend. The end credits roll and Minwook receives a message. The logo he's been meticulously crafting is ready for review. He invites Miran to lend her discerning eye, as he values her artistic input. This leaves Hee-won and Do-jun alone, and sensing an opportune moment, Do-jun suggests they decamp to a nearby cafe. Over coffee, Do-jun inquires about Hee-won's thoughts on the film. She admits feeling saddened by the protagonist's inability to conquer the mountain, a sentiment that prompts a light-hearted proposition from Do-jun. In a quirky move, Do-jun offers to be her hero, even asking what he'd need to do to earn that title. She laughs it off, pleading for him to stop teasing her. Then, out of the blue, he drops a bombshell. He wants to know if she has feelings for their friend, Minwook. Her silence tells him all he needs to know. She's got a thing for Minwook. But before she can spill her heart out, Do-jun cuts her off. He insists it doesn't matter who she's crushing on. They've got bigger fish to fry, like being responsible adults and creating a happy nest for their little bun in the oven, Do-jul. Do-jun then lays down the law. They've got to see each other 4 times a week, juggling their schedules as needed. She nods in agreement, but inside, she's thinking, he's asking questions, but he's already decided the answers. Where's my say in all this? Plus, this new Do-jun seems different. It makes her wonder who the real him is. Lost in her thoughts, she snapped back to reality when Do-jun drops another bombshell. He wants to know if she slept with him to get back at Minwook. He adds that while they're together, he's going to give it his all and expects the same from her. No more drama with Minwook. She assures him that she is already working on moving past her feelings for Minwook. So, he doesn't need to worry about any love triangle shenanigans. 2 weeks and 6 dates later, Hee-won finds herself soaking up the weather outdoors. Her rendezvous with Do-jun has been a pleasant mix of dinner dates and leisurely drives. He's been nothing short of a gentleman, thoughtful and considerate at every turn. But something gnaws at her. Their relationship seems stalled. It doesn't feel like they're making headway. If they were just any other couple, it would be different. But their dates feel more like business meetings than romantic outings. There are no spontaneous texts or cutesy emojis. No "I miss you" messages. Adding to her unease is the stark difference in their financial statuses. She's finding it hard to adjust to his wealth. Marriage? She's not sure if she could ever seriously consider it. Lost in thought, she's interrupted by Se-hyun, who wonders why she's outside instead of in class. As they chat, a man strolls by with a ball. Se-hyun teases that the gym teacher has a crush on her. But Hee-won quickly shuts down the gossip, reminding her it's not cool to spread rumors without knowing the facts. She then reminds her that she had promised to share her problems, but never did. Could it be a trust issue? Se-hyun quickly reassures her that trust isn't the problem. She brings up Tae-woo Jang, a third-year student. Hee-won knows him alright, as the one who has the hots for Se-hyun. Se-hyun looks taken aback. Who spilled the beans? Hee-won shrugs, saying she just put 2 and 2 together from seeing them biking to and from school together. Now, it's Se-hyun's turn to play the rumor police. She clarifies that she bought a bike to enjoy some solitude, but Tae-woo decided to get one too. She then asks Hee-won for advice on how to shake someone off. Is she talking about Tae-woo? Se-hyun seems thrilled that Hee-won is the first one to ever insinuate that Tae-woo could be a bother, even if unintentionally. This gives Se-hyun hope and determination, although Hee-won seems a bit puzzled by her reaction. Their heart-to-heart is interrupted by Ji-hoon. He tells Hee-won it's time to prepare for class, and Se-hyun excuses herself. When Ji-hoon addresses Hee-won as Sunbae instead of him as Jang, she warns him not to address her at all and walks off. Ji-hoon quips that she's leaving him with limited options and wonders how long she can keep up her feisty attitude. Meanwhile, Do-jun Kang is at his desk, but his mind is elsewhere, specifically on Hee-won. He recalls the first day he laid eyes on her, a day when everything seemed to magically align. His last meeting wrapped up half an hour early, giving him an unexpected window of free time. He contemplated grabbing a drink, open to the possibility of company but equally content with solitude. That night, he felt spontaneous and unshackled. Enter Hee-won with her proposal. He had no choice but to lend an ear. His initial impression of her was audacious and bold. Her audacity left him so flabbergasted that he lost his chance to decline, surrendering instead to curiosity about her plans. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, stretching over an hour. She wasn't coy, instead exuding intelligence and warmth. Bold yet shy, her sparkling eyes hanging on to his every word made him feel cherished. When he finally heard her proposal, he found himself intrigued rather than repelled. Looking back, he can't help but wonder if their encounter was part of a larger, unseen plan. He genuinely felt a connection, both physically and emotionally. Quite the unforgettable meet-cute, wouldn't you say? But then, his secretary snaps him out of his thoughts, nudging him back to the grind. Unexpectedly, he throws her a curveball. Am I unlikable? Caught off guard yet armed with a litany of responses, she begins to list off his less appealing qualities, only to be cut short by Do-jun. That wasn't what he meant. She probes further, asking if he's unlikable as a man. The secretary notes his unusual behavior and asks if something's awry. Do-jun mirrors her question, wondering aloud what might be wrong with him. He likens himself to an umbrella after the rain, once useful, now merely a hindrance. His secretary, connecting the dots, asks if Hee-won has called him useless or in the way. But he quickly clarifies that those weren't her exact words. He then asks his secretary if he appears old to her, sparking speculation that Hee-won might have made such a remark. The conversation veers towards whether Hee-won genuinely likes the chairman and if he's tried to win her over with gifts. After all, using his wealth to pique her interest seems like an easy solution. Do-jun shares that he's tried to surprise her with some items he's noticed her eyeing. But each attempt was met with discomfort. His wealth could buy anything she wants, but material possessions don't seem to sway her. So, he pondered over how he could accumulate some points in her book. He even sought advice from his niece Se-hyun on Hee-won's preferences. And the answer? Spicy rice cakes. The secretary can't help but express a tinge of "I told you so," reminding her boss that he'd once advised him to date more and work less. The idea of gifting spicy rice cakes in a relationship was a definite faux pas in his book. But before the secretary can add anything more, Do-jun springs to his feet with a surprising announcement. He's off to get some spicy rice cakes, meeting be damned. After all, he has an adept secretary whom he trusts implicitly to juggle his schedule. So, Do-jun drives straight to the school, hoping to catch a glimpse of Hee-won. And there she is, but this time, she's with another man. The story then takes us back to before Do-jun's arrival. We see Hee-won wrapping up a call with him, setting up yet another meeting. Once done, she heads back to her office. As she walks in, she hears the principal berating one of her students. She observes that he seems particularly harsh on her homeroom kids. Could it be a hangover from last year's incident? She ponders. Ji-hoon steps in to defend the student under fire, but the principal quickly rebuffs him, reminding him of his role as a student teacher. The principal further implies that such mishaps are expected from Miss Hee-won Jang's class. On hearing this, Hee-won confronts the principal, defending her student's actions as harmless and devoid of malice. However, she promises to sternly warn the student, Rani-ku, against doodling on quiz papers in the future. After making Rani apologize once more and instructing her to come see her later, Hee-won also offers an apology, assuring the principal that such an incident won't reoccur. The principal scoffs at the idea of a mere apology being sufficient and then goes on to criticize the arrogance he perceives in both students and teachers. This remark riles up Hee-won, who calls him out for his blatant disrespect and accuses him of holding a grudge over a past incident. Another teacher intervenes to defuse the escalating tension. As the principal storms off, he grumbles about his 20-year teaching career, expressing disbelief at being spoken to in such a manner. As Hee-won exits the school, the teacher who had stepped in earlier approaches her. Grateful. She thanks him for his intervention, but he brushes it off, even apologizing for siding with the principal, just to keep the peace. Out of the blue, he asks if she's dating anyone and suggests they grab dinner if she's single. He also mentions that the gym teacher seems to have a soft spot for her. To nip the conversation in the bud, she quickly says she's already seeing someone, though she still appreciates his invitation. Just as she continues her stroll, she hears Do-jun calling her name from afar, causing her heart to skip a beat. His tone hints at an undercurrent of jealousy. Mr. Shin, the other teacher, sees Chairman Do-jun Kong calling out to Hee-won and starts wondering if he's the mystery man she's dating. Before he can get an answer, Hee-won takes off in a flash towards Do-jun. Surprisingly, Do-jun also breaks into a run to meet her halfway, leaving her puzzled as she was already heading his way. Upon reaching her, Do-jun wraps his arms around her, chastising her for running while pregnant. This unexpected display leaves bystanders whispering and speculating about a possible movie shoot. Overwhelmed, Hee-won pleads with him to let go due to the growing audience. Once they're safely in the car, she quizzes him on why he'd call out and wave, given his well-known status at school. He admits that the thought hadn't crossed his mind until she brought it up. The conversation then veers to a magazine article praising his sharp intellect, prompting him to tease her about still reading up on him. He also curiously asks about Mr. Shin, the teacher he saw her with earlier. Hee-won explains that Mr. Shin had assisted her with something and had casually asked about her relationship status. She reassures Do-jun that she informed him that she was seeing someone. A seemingly jealous Do-jun, however, can't help but wonder why Mr. Shin would be interested in her love life. But Hee-won dismisses his concern, stating that she can't possibly know Mr. Shin's motives. Do-jun then asks Hee-won to remain committed to him until she makes her final decision, which she assures him she has by declaring she's seeing someone. As they drive off, she inquires about their destination. With a smirk, Do-jun reveals they're off to have spicy rice cakes. Later, Se-hyun and her buddy Rani-ku are ambling out of school when Se-hyun questions her friend about the math test stunt. Was she trying to ruffle the teacher's feathers? Rani shrugs it off, not realizing the principal lacked a sense of humor. As they saunter on, they notice the buzz among the students. The gossip mill is spinning about Ms. Hee-won Jang spotted in a cozy embrace with an unidentified guy. Eager for some gossip, they eavesdrop to gather more juicy details about their homeroom teacher. Just then, Ji-hoon walks by, nudging the students to head home. Spotting him, Rani quickly drags her friend towards him. She thanks him for his attempt to help in the teacher's office, despite his limited influence. Trying to lift their spirits, he suggests treating them to some spicy rice cakes before they part ways. Se-hyun politely declines, but just as Rani tries to persuade her to accept, she remembers she left the test papers behind. With a quick wave, she dashes back to retrieve them, leaving Se-hyun alone with the teacher. An awkward who-sh hangs in the air as Ji-hoon and Se-hyun find themselves standing together. Breaking the silence, Ji-hoon observes that Se-hyun seems pretty tight with Ms. Hee-won Jang. Se-hyun shoots back, noting he also appears close to her. This prompts Ji-hoon to admit their shared history as college buddies. He attempts to dig a little deeper, deciding he won't push too hard but will just toss out a few conversational hooks to see if she bites. His casual comments skillfully suggest his insight into Hee-won's life, and Se-hyun, unsuspecting, takes the bait. She reveals that she bumped into her homeroom teacher at the OBGYN, then cheekily asks if he's dating Hee-won. Ji-hoon denies it but can't help his curiosity when Se-hyun hints at Hee-won's pregnancy. She then asks if he knows who Hee-won is currently seeing, and he cleverly keeps up his act of being in the know about Hee-won. Based on what he's heard, he begins to piece together the puzzle, suspecting that Hee-won might be expecting. As they stand there, lost in thought, Rani dashes back to them. Se-hyun quickly begs Ji-hoon to keep their conversation a secret from Rani. fearing the news will spread like wildfire if she gets wind of it. Their destination for spicy rice cakes turns out to be closed, much to Arayanai's disappointment. Undeterred, they decide to find another spot to satisfy their craving. Meanwhile, Hee-won and Do-jun Kong find themselves in another restaurant, where Do-jun, ever the gentleman, has ordered a smorgasbord of dishes to give Hee-won a variety of choices. She wonders aloud about their ability to finish all the food and questions the absence of other patrons, suspecting he might have rented out the entire place again. He confirms her suspicion, causing her to inwardly cringe at his extravagance. She can't help but wonder how he knew about her fondness for spicy rice cakes, but she doesn't let that stop her from digging in. As he watches her eat, he suggests that if something is bothering her, she should voice it. Her response is a question: what's there to complain about when dining in a privately rented restaurant? But he senses her unease, comparing her chopstick use to stabbing him, and encourages her to share her thoughts. Finally, she admits, only because he insists, that his habit of renting out entire places makes her uncomfortable. It's not necessary to flaunt his wealth to the point of inconveniencing others, especially since this is a popular spot for her students. How sad would they be if they couldn't get their favorite food here? Do-jun explains that he wanted to treat her to the best spicy rice cakes, which are said to be from this very restaurant. As he speaks, she can't help but feel her heart flutter. Maybe he's a better person than she initially thought. He finishes by saying that if she doesn't like such gestures, she should make a decision so they can meet more freely. However, she interprets this as Do-jun wanting to create a happy family for Do-jul, which inherently involves marriage. All the while, he simply watches her as she enjoys her meal. Following their dinner, Hee-won insists on boxing up the untouched dishes. The aroma of spicy cuisine fills the car, a testament to their extravagant meal. She playfully chides Do-jun for his wastefulness, dashing his hopes of impressing her with his generosity. Yet, there's an undeniable charm in watching her stubbornly eat the rice cakes. Instead of heading home, Do-jun takes a detour. Usually, Hee-won doesn't question their destination, but today, she's unusually quiet, lost in thought. They drive in companionable silence to a cafe offering a stunning night view. Despite the month that has passed since their first meeting, Do-jun vividly recalls the electric sensation of Hee-won's touch and the softness of her lips. Each time he sees her, a wave of longing washes over him. It's a feeling he struggles to understand. As if he were a love-struck teenager again. When he proposed to her after discovering Do-jul's existence, he believed it was out of responsibility. Now, he finds himself questioning his motives. Does he want to marry her because of their child, or is it because he yearns for her companionship? This is the first time he's fallen so deeply for someone. And also the first time he's faced such a rejection. As they cruise back in the car, Do-jun notices Hee-won nodding off. She looks a bit uncomfortable, so he decides to adjust her seat for a more relaxed position. This brings him closer to her, and as he does, she stirs and opens her eyes. Seizing the moment, he asks if he can kiss her, playfully adding that silence at the count of 3 will be taken as consent. Before she can utter a word, he leans in for the kiss. Their intimate moment is abruptly interrupted by a ringing phone. Hee-won suggests he answer it, unaware that it's her phone that's buzzing. Given the persistence of the caller, it seems like an important call. Do-jun, however, tells her that if she doesn't mind ignoring it, he's more than happy to resume their interrupted kiss. But she swiftly picks up the phone, only to find out it's her dad on the other end. As she delves into a family conversation, Do-jun sits patiently, respecting her privacy and waiting for her to finish. We learn that when Hee-won was just a little girl of 6, her dad introduced her to a stranger and announced he'd be marrying her. She can't quite remember her feelings from that moment, but she recalls hoping that her dad's happiness would mean more visits from him. She thought she had a role in his joy, not realizing her feelings were inconsequential to him. Hidden from her young eyes, the stranger was already expecting her half-sibling. Her dad was already shifting his focus, ready to shower his new family with all the love he had, just as her mom had once said he could. But her dad's frequent visits remained a dream. With time, she simply accepted her dad's new marriage as an inevitable part of life. Their phone conversation drifts on for a bit before she finally hangs up. Do-jun, curious, asks who had called. When she tells him, he further inquires if her parents live far away. It's then she reveals her parents divorced when she was only 4 years old. Hee-won opens up a bit more, explaining how her mom lived alone after the divorce, while her dad is about to tie the knot for the 3rd time. She also mentions her 2 half-sisters, with the youngest currently out of their dad's reach. So, she decides to step in, setting up a meeting with her. As she steps out of Do-jun's car, he quickly follows, curious if she'd introduce him to her sister. He takes a moment to study her. Noticing her lips are slightly swollen. He comments that had he known the call would upset her, he would have urged her not to answer. This catches her off guard. She hadn't told him she was sad, nor did she show it. Her story was shared in a neutral tone. It makes her wonder about Do-jun. How could he know her feelings even before she did? Back home, Hee-won offers her sister some of the food they brought back. However, her sister seems more interested in Do-jun's business card. She's thrilled at the thought of having met the vice president of the Daehan group, and excitedly speculates he might become their hyungbu, a term for an older sister's husband. Despite Hee-won's protests, Ji-won insists that Do-jun seemed to enjoy the title. When Ji-won reveals she has a day off from school, she proposes visiting Hyungbu at his office for lunch. Hee-won isn't thrilled with the idea, but Ji-won insists Do-jun had given her an open invitation to visit anytime. The business card, according to her, is her golden ticket. Protective as ever, Hee-won warns her against such a visit. Their conversation shifts to Ji-won's recent argument with their dad, with Hee-won probing if it's related to their dad's impending marriage. Ji-won then shares her feelings of betrayal by their dad. Even though she understands he has his own life, she can't help but remember how heartbroken he was when their mom passed away. She vividly recalls the dinner where he introduced them to his new love interest, and how he showered her with affection. Watching him fuss over this woman, Ji-won couldn't help but feel hurt. It had only been 2 years since their mom's passing. Yet it seemed their dad's affections had shifted so swiftly. They delve deeper into their family matters, sharing feelings and thoughts. The conversation takes a pause when Ji-won gets back to the food Hee-won brought. She then asks Hee-won if she thinks her boyfriend will make it to their dad's wedding the next day. Hee-won, however, replies that he's a pretty busy man. The wedding day is here, and Do-jun makes his entrance. As he raises his hand to wave at Hee-won, she dashes towards him, pulling his hand down, insisting they need to chat. As they navigate towards a quieter corner, they bump into Hee-won's aunt, who is intrigued by the handsome man accompanying Hee-won. Before Hee-won can conjure up a response, Do-jun introduces himself as her boyfriend. This revelation prompts the aunt to whisk them away, proudly introducing Do-jun to everyone as Hee-won's future husband. The introductions happen in a whirlwind, and despite Hee-won's attempts to steal a moment with Do-jun, her aunt persists in implying a deeper relationship between them. She even hints at an impending wedding, to which Do-jun playfully promises some good news soon. It's clear that the aunt is thrilled about the idea of her niece having a boyfriend. When Hee-won finally manages to pull Do-jun aside, she questions his apparent deviation from his usual adherence to schedules and plans. But Do-jun shifts the focus to her, asking if she's been eating well as she seems to have lost weight, and if she's experiencing morning sickness. Back to her question, he admits that it seems like his routine and plans only falter when it comes to her. Wrapping his jacket around her, he promises to ponder why he's unable to stick to his plans when it comes to her and why it doesn't seem to bother him in the least. It seems like the romance is growing between these lovebirds. Comment Hee-won below if you want to see part 2. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.